I'm back. I'm sorry that I had to leave left so abruptly. We had difficult technical problems, and uh, and we had to wait 2 days before these problems were resolved. And when I left, I was about to tell you about how the slave economy works, how the um, and how uh, the colonial economy works, the neo-colony works, and how African Americans are colonized people in the United States, and the 10 kingdoms of the revived Roman Empire, which are 10 European countries, which include the United States, because the United States came into power by the little horn, which is described in the Bible. The United States and the United States president came into existence when it uprooted three other nations from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific. And those kingdoms were called England, France, and Spain. However, the United States does not mention Spain when they talks about the countries that became the United States, the colonies that became the United States. Probably because we are led to believe that the United States bought Louisiana, or the Louisiana Purchase, from France when it was actually bought from Spain, because the French had the administration and Spain had the sovereignty over that area. And also, Holland was called the Lion. Germany was called the Eagle. And when I say Germany, I'm talking about the Principality of Prussia. Remember, Germany did not become a unified nation called Germany until 1880. And France is called a white flower. And England was called a red rose. And Russia was called the Great Bear. And none of the African Muslim countries are mentioned. But they were Morocco, Libya, the German Empire started with the African nation of Cameroon in 1884. The Cameroon also had members of the Ibu tribe. The Yellow Rose of England had the biggest empire that ever lived, that ever existed in the world. France was England's rival that ended up in 100 Years' War. And France did not end slavery until 1880, along with Cuba, Brazil, and other Latin American countries. And the United States was considered a second-rate power in the world that fancied itself as a world empire, of which it did not become until 1920. And then it started the Century of America by President Woodrow Wilson. It had already started the 100 years of African American oppression from 1619 to 2019. And also to 1920 started the first 100 years of oppression of African Americans to 2020. And it also started the 235 years that African Americans remain in slavery in the United States. It also marked the 235 years that the Igbo people served in Egypt, and they left after 35 years and traveled to the Niger Delta, where they split into the tribe of Dan and Gad and went by ship to the Gold Coast and settled in 12 villages that became Accra, Ghana. And when I was studying in England, my tutor was Robert Obalite Egagdengme, who was an expert on the Hebrew Israelite in Africa, the Middle East, and America. In 2018, another one of my tutors, Loretta Algona Davis of Bull Bay, Jamaica, was one of my tutors in England, but in 2018 she came from Bull Bay to Lincoln, North Carolina, to explain my ancestors of the kingdom of Dahomey under King Gazu. And it is written in the books of F.K. Buya a West African and African historian. And she explained how the Lomax family of Lincoln County, North Carolina, the Johnson family of Lincoln County, North Carolina, and how they are related to Hiram Rose rebels. The first senator, black senator that served in Congress, in the Senate, and he was from Fayetteville, North Carolina. Loretta Davis explained to me that Hiram Revels was not black in the sense of African American or Negro. He was a Lumbee Indian. A Melungeon and a Sicilian, because all of them were the same people. Like Hattie Mae Winfrey, Oprah's maternal grandmother, who was related to Elvis Presley and Abraham Lincoln, because Abraham Lincoln was a Melungeon, Elvis Presley was a Melungeon, and the Melungeons and the Lumbees are the same people, and the Sicilians are the same people. I talked about this in the book called Middletown, Connecticut, and Ignored African American History by Rudolph Young. It is a book online that you can buy from Amazon. And in that I explain how we are related to Adolphus de la Mata of Savannah, who was a janitor at Spelman College called Reverend Adolphus de la Mata, a Baptist black minister who was a janitor at Spelman College to supplement his income. And when he died, he left his money to Spelman College to educate black female missionaries. And I explained how we are descended from Fleming Butts, the son of Reverend Adolphus de la Mata, found in Middletown, Connecticut, and how we are descended from Celia Davis, the mother-in-law of Adolphus de la Mata, in Middletown, Connecticut. Her name was Arlene Davis Butts. Of Cross Street AME Zion Cross Street Church, located in the famous Beeman Triangle. The first independent black community founded in America. Of course, the second independent black community found in North Carolina was Freedmantown, east of Lincoln, North Carolina, and Reverend Garrison Frazier described the black community in his meeting with E.M. Stanton and General William T. Sherman in 1865. And he was a member of one of the black communities along White Bluff Road, which is now called White Bluff Road in Savannah, Georgia, that was formed after Shermantown near Stone Mountain, Georgia. Now, there was a slave named Polly who was taken to Tennessee. And one of her descendants was Rufus Abernathy, who was a black Confederate who served in a unit in Alabama, which was a Confederate hospital and supply depot. And then he was sent to Fort McCallister in Atlanta, Georgia. And then he heard that there were problems at the Freedmen camp in Stone Mountain, Georgia. And he rushed to Stone Mountain, Georgia, but he arrived too late. William T. Sherman's Blue Men had systematically raped every young woman and young girl in that camp. And when the black men resisted, they shot dead 14 African men, and then had gone on to Newton County, Georgia, Covington, Georgia, and conferred with Ben Thomas. We'll get back to that meeting, but first, the people of the Freedmen camp in Stone Mountain when they established the town, called the town Shermantown, after the general that had committed atrocities against them. Shermantown was the third town, independent community established in America. Yet, Freedmantown in Lincoln Mrs. Dillingham, we are going to go 50 minutes like we did last time. And Ms. Dillingham, we are going to go 50 minutes like we did last time. We're at 31 minutes now, so but anyway, like I was saying, Freedmantown in Lincoln was the first independent town that was established in the American diaspora, African diaspora of the United States and possibly of the world. When we say independent community, we mean where there was a establishment of at least one institution. The black communities established the church as that institution. And then as they grew, they established another church that was probably a Presbyterian church, because the first church they established was a Baptist church. And the next church they established was a Methodist church. And then they established schools. In the beginning, the schools were established in the churches. And there is a rule that says if you lose control over your churches, you lose control over your community, and your community will disappear. The AFC 1863 stated that black people are more concerned about the laws of the church than the laws of God, that they have the greatest religiosity, but it does not translate into a higher moral standard. They also said that black soldiers practice a rude religion that I understood meant fundamentalist religion. And the Union Army said, we can use this against them. So they told the white commanders to encourage black men, black soldiers, that they were fighting the Confederates under the will of God. They did this because they did not want black people coming to the North and making demands on them and demanding they rewarded them for the boons of freedom. So they said, you know, you have to look towards the Confederates for that reward of freedom. And the reason they said this, because they noticed that it was the black troops that will attack the Confederates, oblivious to high casualties. Without fear. And they would be rewarded by God. This is what the same thing that suicide bombers are told over in the Middle East. However, in Islam, God said, you cannot go to heaven without my permission. And suicide bombing is no more than bypassing the will of God. Because you are saying that you can go to heaven by murder and suicide. And received your 7 virgins. Also it says that the black Union troops died at a less rate than white troops because the black Union troops were cleaner. Because 50% of the Union soldiers and the Confederate soldiers died from sickness and disease. In Gaston County, North Carolina, there was a free black man named Tom Clark, who tried to enlist in the Confederate Army at the beginning of the war, and he was rejected because he was only 12 years old. Then he waited 2 years and enlisted at 14. He was attached to the unit of Eric Erickson, a Dane who commanded the 57th Regiment of Confederate troops. And Tom Clark was assigned to a company of men from Lincoln and Gaston counties as a cook. The Confederate Army decided to attach 2 cooks to every company and paid them $14 a month, more than the Union soldiers and the 54th Massachusetts until they started complaining, which included E. Biddle, Eli George Biddle. I've got 5 more minutes. So I am not going to answer that phone. I will continue with my story. George Eli Biddle was wounded at the battle at the siege of Battery Wagner in Charleston. And then he came back home to Massachusetts and joined the Connecticut Conference of the AME Zion Church, and in 1931 the migrants from South Carolina and the Maple Grove clan of Oprah Winfrey and the group of the True Vine Holiness Fire Brand Church of God in America, called the Bishop of the New England Conference, and they sent them Reverend Eli George Biddle as their first pastor of the Cross Street AME Zion Church, as the Cross Street AME Zion Church had ceased to exist. And the bishop, of course, sent Biddle. And then they moved their church from Middletown, Connecticut to Portland, Connecticut, that is on Main Street in Portland, Connecticut today. Now, Tom Clark, he was an expert on herbal medicine, and he included in every batch of food, he included these herbs. And that is how his unit, his company, escaped sickness and the disease. And when he got out of the military, he went back to high shows. And the person who ran the high shows iron furnaces was Admiral Charles Wilkes, who commanded the West Indian Squadron when Bosco Obasanjo was taken off a slave ship and taken to Liberia. And that's how the Capella sold him into slavery. So when Bosco Sanjo came to America in 1840, he recognized Charles Wilkes. Now, Tom Clark worked at the Fulham furnace for a while because Charles Wilkes wanted to retain a skilled labor force. And to do for this aim, he established a school and a church for blacks in high shows. However, Tom Clark moved to Hardin in high shows. And became one of the founders of Fancy Hill Baptist Church. And he the one who named Fancy Hill Church after Stonewall Jackson's horse named Fancy. I think we should end our conversation, our lecture, and I will meet you again on the internet, YouTube, Dealing Works. Thank you and goodbye.